remaining officers in the stack started laying down cover fire, left positions of cover themselves.
Okay, guys, you just saw HPD's animation of what they say occurred. I'm going to give you, I've been in the house, been on scene, and I'm going to provide some videos after this. But first, I wanted to give you a diagram of what the actual house looks like and how it was laid out. And then I'm going to show you here, and bear with me, I'm holding a camera and a clipboard and a pen and looking through a screen finder, so it's going to be a little challenging here. But what HPD is alleging is that, okay, so here's the front door, right door right there. There's a window here, and a window back here that have air conditioners, window air conditioners in it. The temperature that day, I'm guessing those window air conditioners were on and operating. The television is here. When I went in, the television was muted. I unmuted it, and it was playing at a pretty good, pretty loud volume. I'm guessing the police muted it. But it would be necessary to play it at a loud volume to overcome the noise of the window air conditioner that was here. Also, Mr. Tuttle was known to be a little hard of hearing. Mr. Tuttle was back here. There's the X for Mr. Tuttle. Miss Tuttle's, Nichols, was in this bedroom here. Okay, you've seen the animation that HPD put out, and you can see from my diagram of the residence. Remember, here is the front door where the officers enter. You can see from my diagram of the residence, and you'll see from the videos, that the HPD narrative of the shooting scene is all wrong. So the first officer through the door, breaks the door open. He is rushed by the dog, the canine that belonged to Mr. Tuttle. He shoots the dog. The dog falls about right here. And put a D for dog right there. Mr. Tuttle from here, who had a concealed carry permit and was wearing his revolver apparently, draws his revolver and engages the first officer. The first officer goes down prone here. I'm going to draw a line there and put a P for police. Now, there were several other officers. HPD says 4. I'm saying there were probably 3 that had entered, and they were here, maybe 1 at the door and 1 here. So 3 there, police officers. Miss Tuttle is in this room where the firearms were found. She doesn't need to rush in here and grab an officer's gun. She has 2 shotguns and a .22 rifle in the bedroom with her here. Notice the proximity of the door to where these officers are. So HPD has you to believe that would lead you to believe Miss Tuttle, Nichols, the wife, exits this door, runs at this police officer while Mr. Tuttle back here is firing in this direction, and these officers are firing at him. She crosses all that gunfire to a downed police officer and then attempts to take his weapon from him. Now the weapons are, by the way, are going to be strapped to the officers. They have slings that the policy requires that the weapons be attached to them for retention purposes. These 3 officers then kill Miss Tuttle, the wife, Miss Nichols, and she falls here after being shot. Notice where she's laying, right next to the downed police officer. One of the first officers that had come through the door had been injured and had gone back out into the yard. He falls over in this area. There is blood on the ground there. It's blood soaked. He then gets back up, comes back up, enters the doorway, and I believe this officer that went down is Officer Goings. I believe that is going to be Goings. Goes back in. They brush aside the wife, injured mother, Miss Tuttle Nichols, and extract the wounded officer. They could have at that point, because the gunfire had ceased. Mr. Tuttle is down. He's down. He's not shooting. They could have grabbed her, dragged her out the door along with the wounded officer. Did they do that? No. They extract The wounded officer, these 3 officers, and the officer that had gone back out here, they are out the door and in the front yard where it's safe. They then leave the house. They set up a perimeter, leave the house for 2 hours. 2 hours. They leave these people in there to bleed to death and die. 2 hours. Now, I don't know if the dog was killed in the initial gunfire from the shotgun. I'm going to assume that he was, but the Tuttles were not. Pretty sure they were still alive at that point. For sure, Mr. Tuttle was, because they could hear him hollering and screaming and whatnot. That comes from one of the neighbors who could hear him in the back call for help. After 2 hours, of course, there are no more calls for help. They send the robot in to clear the house to make sure there's nobody else in there. And then they go in and do their thing. However, even after having the robot in, before they entered the house, okay, they came to a window and a SWAT officer shot the downed Mr. Tuttle. Mr. Tuttle's not moving. They shot him to ensure he was dead from that window. That comes from a neighbor. Shot him to ensure he was dead. Now you'll notice in the videos that the house is in a state of disarray. Chief Acevedo says that they didn't really search for drugs. That they didn't care anymore because they were worried about the officers, blah, 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 blah. I can tell you that's not true. They tore that house up looking for drugs. They went through that house with a very fine comb looking for drugs. And they realized there were no drugs to be found because they didn't exist. The whole scene here is ridiculous. You've got gunfire, bullet holes in the wall right here going into a dead space. Or, maybe they went into this officer from outside. Friendly fire. Friendly fire. This downed officer here, if let's assume what HPD says is true, that she was on top of him fighting him for his weapon, in that close proximity, how do you shoot her and not hit him? Friendly fire. I have no doubt that Mr. Tuttle got him with the first few rounds that were fired. However, not buying the rest of it. When you go in the house, you find where Mr. Tuttle fell, you find where these officers fell, and you find where the dog fell easily. There's huge, massive, blood-soaked areas there. And you can see the difference when you look at the videos that I'm going to show you here. You'll see the difference between a 5.56 round hole, which is like that. It's a small hole. Even if it goes in at an angle and it elongates the hole, it looks like that. And a 38 special hole, which is about that big. Okay, so you can easily spot the difference in the size of the holes when you look at it. I'm not going to show any video of this interior space out of respect for the murdered citizens. I will show the exterior, and I'll show a couple of videos from the exterior looking in to these rooms. But the main thing is, I want you guys to see the difference in what actually transpired and the actual layout of the home compared to what HPD has put out. And here goes, I'll roll those videos now.